hope you enjoyed this video essay. Not doing this type of video again. Hi. I was wrong. With the Illumination Mario movie ending up an overall success, particularly for fans of the franchise, people have been wondering what may come next. And in many cases, that led to thinking about a Legend of Zelda movie, as it is one of the flagship series of Nintendo. I am a massive fan of the Zelda franchise, and as such, I've been thinking about this possibility quite a bit, more so recently. Though I haven't seen that many other think pieces on the subject, I can tell that it would be a much more difficult movie to get right compared to Mario. And there's a couple notable concerns that pop up in speculation. And bad memories.
It sure is boring around here.
My boy, this peace is what all true warriors strive for.
I just wonder what gets the others.
So, I'd like to offer my own concerns, speculations, and wishes for this thing that is very likely to happen one of these days. You can use the video chapters to skip to the parts that interest you if you want. Also, they just so happen to be time-themed, cause Zelda has lots to do with time. Smirk. Video game adaptations have quite the reputation. Modern ones have been panning out rather well, but after how things were in the early days, no wonder we're still wary. It's a difficult art, adapting anything into a new format. Some do it well, some even fantastic. But really, most range from divisive to downright terrible. In terms of bad Zelda adaptations, well, you all know the infamy of the CDI games and the cartoon series. But other than that, there were a couple of odd games like the one starring Tinkle and a few comics from the early days that are kinda weird. But there's only the one horrendous on-screen adaptation with 13 episodes. The failure of this and the old Mario movie must have really killed Nintendo's faith to do anything else for a long while, understandably so. But we are no longer in an age where gamers were widely considered cringe losers, and games were seen as some newfangled kid stuff that would turn them violent. The Legend of Zelda is over 30 years old. People who grew up with these games are adults in the industry now. They get it. And original creators are much more involved, though maybe a little too overprotective sometimes. Also, I want to shout out the manga by Akira Himekawa. Sure, the way they have to summarize these stories within 1 or 2 volumes of standard manga does not work to tell the tales of the games well, but the illustrations are really good, and they have their aspects and moments that are very well done story-wise. Like Ocarina of Time Link struggling against Volvagia because he made friends with it as a kid, or the dynamics of the Four Swords Links. I recommend taking a look at these, especially the newest Twilight Princess one. They actually got to take their time with it, telling stories straight from the game, from background lore, and just original beats with even more darkness and brutality than the games, all in a good way. There are also countless really well done fan-made projects, animations, comics, fan art, and fan fiction galore. It's rather telling what we fans tend to focus on, like lots of angst featuring the cycle of rebirth and Ganondorf's redemption. Especially good guy Ganondorf. Boy howdy, are we obsessed! I blame it all on Wind Waker. Of course, I should specify, I'm also a massive fan of good Ganondorf. So, rumors started of Illumination trying to sign a deal with Nintendo to make a Zelda movie. People who heard of this may have started freaking out a bit. Same. Investigating this led me to writing the script. However, the response of Illumination's CEO suggests that it isn't the case. Though, it is likely Nintendo is thinking about some on-screen adaptation of the franchise nowadays. According to Adam Conover, Netflix was producing a live-action Zelda series in 2015, but Nintendo aborted the project due to this information leaking. Honestly, it's sort of an odd reason, but maybe there were compounding factors involved. Either way, I'm kinda glad this didn't happen. Not just because live-action Netflix adaptation is such a meme, but I'll get into that more later. Additionally, Eiji Aonuma, producer of the Zelda franchise, is reportedly interested in the Zelda movie, though interest alone doesn't mean anything will happen. So, that's what my research on current events has turned up. Do let me know if I got anything wrong. And you may also comment on how well or poorly this all aged. Feel free to discuss. Now, onto my main focus. Brain rotting over what an on-screen Zelda adaptation should be, in my opinion. First off, should it just be a movie? Or maybe even a series of some kind and length? Either can work, honestly. A series means more content, which could be either great or terrible, or something in between content-wise. Perhaps it would be better to just try to make one movie length of quality content. Maybe a series of shorts like Pokemon Twilight Wings would be neat. Or all of the above! In any case, it would likely be best if the content was finite and digestible. Serialized Zelda does not need to be like Pokemon or the MCU or anything. In terms of visual medium, my hierarchy would go something like this. 2D animation over 3D animation over live action. I will admit my bias towards animation as the better medium to tell fantastical stories, but it just makes sense. With animation, you have more freedom to be expressive and stylized, and magical elements blend better than trying to do photorealistic CGI. The Zelda universe features many fantastical-looking, non-humanoid shaped creatures and characters that would be difficult to adapt to live action. Now, if it were going for a darker tone, I guess I wouldn't be opposed to the terror of a realistically rendered Red. And having real actors as Hylians in cool costumes could be nice. I would get slightly worried over casting being a star-studded Hollywood fest, but that's an issue with the whole entertainment industry. I don't need to get into that now. And since we're on that topic, I say, please let a Japanese studio do it. The vibes and lore of the franchise fit Japanese storytelling much better than the usual Hollywood stuff. They still make 2D animation over there and it looks fantastic! Heck, cel-shaded 3D animation has been coming into its own as well, both in the East and the West. With the games going through their style phases, in the end, they settled on the cel-shaded look, as it is more timeless than the more gritty and painted style of Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword. So yes, I'd love a Zelda anime. Have you seen the Palutena Smash 4 trailer? Have you seen how pretty the game cutscenes can be? Have you seen this beautiful man? Fans have been thinking about Studio Ghibli, as their influence can be felt deep within especially Breath of the Wild, though do consider that the masterpieces we think about in this regard have been made quite a long time ago. Nonetheless, there are lots of fantastic animation studios in Japan, and live action might be okay too. Perhaps? Honestly, maybe just don't do live action.
Please, just tell me. What is it?
Before anything else, I have to shout out what I might be the most worried about. It has to be an original story set in the Zelda universe. Straight up adapting one of the games would not work due to time constraints, different pacing, and just... Video game storytelling is miles different than it is for movies or series. Video games have an inherent level of non-linearity, while film is entirely linear. Don't try to make one fit the other. Look at recent examples. Sonic and Mario took their premise and lore and just had their own little adventures. Detective Pikachu took the premise and overall mystery of its fairly niche spin-off game and made the way to the conclusion its own thing. So just create a new Link and Zelda in a new scenario. One that can be inherently built into its medium and utilize the world and lore in its own way. Or maybe create some kind of prequel or sequel to one of the games. There are some gaps in the timeline that could be filled. Legends that served as background lore for things like Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time, or Minish Cap. Or what adventures happen in a world after the hero defeats the Demon King. It doesn't even have to be a Link, Zelda, and Ganon-centric story. It likely will be, and I'm just spitballing some interesting ideas. Feel free to run with them at your leisure. I know I am. A fairly prevalent concern is how to handle Link, the silent protagonist. First off, I want to clarify to the non-believers, Link has a personality in lots of the games, even if he doesn't have direct dialogue. He reacts in certain non-verbal ways, and some people say things about him that characterize each iteration. And please do, for the love of Hylia, give him a personality in the movie. Don't make your main character a piece of plain bread. So, in terms of talking, there are some options. 1. Just make him talk. Easier for what the writers and general audience is used to in a movie. And it can work, like in the manga, or the fact that in Japanese Breath of the Wild, the adventure log is written in first person by Link himself. I'm still bitter about this, we were robbed in the localization! He just needs to have a personality that isn't dumb bitch or horny bastard or whatever. Personally, it's not quite as interesting as the alternatives. 2. Selectively mute Link. Only talks when he absolutely needs to, but making other vocalizations like combat yells. Seems to be the most canon compliant, as Link does usually seem able to talk, but only does it through text response options or silent fade to black explanations. In Breath of the Wild, it is directly acknowledged in Zelda's diary why he doesn't talk much. Localization varies, but it's basically a more shy and introverted nature mixed with the immense responsibility of his duties. He made the choice to be a strong pillar for the kingdom, to hide his emotions and silently bear his burdens. Essentially, he refuses to shed the tears of the kingdom. So in canon, Link's selective mutism seems to stem from an active choice to only talk when necessary. And more often than not, it can be an inability to talk in many scenarios due to stress and anxiety. Imagine movie Link starting out getting yelled at by someone and unable to talk back or explain himself, then mildly venting about it at home to his family or close friend. He may be able to bravely face danger, but perhaps he has to learn to be more brave socially too. Doesn't mean he has to end the movie talking full sentences normally, but being more content in when to speak and when not to, and utilizing different ways of expressing himself non-verbally would be neat. Which is even more appropriate for the nuclear option. 3. The one where Link actually doesn't talk. He could utilize writing or sign language, lots of physical language, and this option might have the most need of a companion character. They may have their controversies in the games, but story-wise they usually work. And for a movie, having someone to interact with the more introverted and potentially silent hero would be a good move. Think about it. Generally, the bad things about Zelda companions are related to game mechanics, too much tutorializing and explaining. Story-wise, they usually work out fine, and their characterizations are pretty good too. Heck, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom even have companions. Not the classic singular character that is with Link 24/7, but ones that accompany him on certain story missions. Link shouldn't be a completely lone hero. He shouldn't be able to save the entire kingdom all on his own. And forming a close bond with a consistent companion would be a perfect recipe for them to tug at our heartstrings when something bad or overly good happens. Side note, he doesn't need a romance with Zelda. There are really only 2 or 3 Links that support the ship in their canon, aka Skyward Sword and the whole Breath of the Wild package, also Spirit Tracks. So I'm sure it can work, like a lot of things, just saying they don't need it. Side characters having a romance with or crushing on Link though? Absolutely valid. Have you played the games? Again, have you seen this man? Finally, this part is a bit more optional, but you know we've all been screaming about this for a while now. More screen time with Zelda and Ganondorf! They're the other 2/3 of the Triforce, the other 2 players in the eternal cycle of the Zelda universe. Don't just lock them away in a tower or another time or a seal the whole time. We know the games aren't going to go ham with playable Zelda, or plentiful moments of a deeply troubled but not quite pure evil Ganondorf in the games. But the movie could be a bit more like that. Just a bit. Perhaps.
It would be so awesome. It would be so cool.
A modern on-screen adaptation of the Legend of Zelda franchise would require a lot more effort than the Mario movie to make good, but it shouldn't be too much to ask. The Zelda game writers deliver in each game already. grand fantasy stories with a darker tone might not be as marketable to a larger audience, but this is Zelda for Din's sake. It's still a huge franchise from one of the most prolific video game companies. They can figure out how to make it sell like crazy and be good quality content at the same time. It would be incredibly different from the Mario movie, obviously, in every aspect. That shouldn't stop them from daring and making some delectable food. I emphasize how different these two are because Mario caused this discussion to rise up again with the Illumination rumors. Whoever is going to make a Zelda movie or series has to know that viscerally. And I know I'm just one small voice, but I have to say it, even if it's just for myself screaming into the void. I care a lot, so I want whoever would be working on this to care a lot too. Fans usually do the property more justice than a professional who isn't a fan or deeply familiar with it. But I have faith that it will be at least good enough, considering recent game adaptations mostly working out. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned. Maybe. Eventually.